Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate our witnesses being here today. As a senator from a border state, I know it's critical that we work together to tackle threats against the homeland and along our nation's borders. And I remain committed to working every day to secure Arizona's border, keep Arizonans safe, and ensure that migrants are treated fairly and humanely. I'd like to start with the tragedy that occurred on Monday in Sonora, Mexico. My deepest sympathies and condolences go to the victims and their families. Details are still coming in, but we know that at least 9 people, including mothers and their young children, were murdered, apparently by transnational criminal organizations involved in the illicit drug trade. These victims have relatives from Arizona, and my state is hurting right now. So my first question is for you, Mr. Ray. In this situation, will the FBI play a role in bringing these perpetrators to justice, ensuring that the families receive some redress?
So thank you, Senator. We too are deeply troubled and heartbroken about the loss. We have, through our LEGAT office in Mexico, reached out to our partners, our Mexican partners, to offer assistance and are engaged with them, also with the embassy and the State Department. In addition, we are in the process of having what we call our Victim Services Division get in touch with the relatives who are here in the United States to see if they can be of assistance. It's a division that I think I'm very proud of, just given the way in which they bring a level of compassion and sometimes attention to some of the most basic concerns and needs of victims and their families.
Thank you. For all of our witnesses who are here today, I'd like to get a commitment from each of you that my office is briefed on the investigation, and I'd like to hear about your agency's efforts to combat transnational criminal organizations. As we see every day, the impact on Arizona and Arizona families is unabated.
The FBI is the lead, obviously, with the U.S. persons being targeted by that violence overseas. What I would say is we are absolutely committed to partnering with you, Senator. And I would say as far as the benchmark of intelligence and operations, one of our top facilities is actually in your state in Tucson, and I would be delighted if I could escort you there for a visit to see it. But it's really about that partnership with the state and local law enforcement, our Mexican partners, and sharing of that real-time tactical level information so we can identify those threats at the border, but really any way south of the border in Mexico, and sharing that information with our partners in the Mexican government.
Thank you.
Senator, we'd be happy to try to keep you informed as best we can and as is appropriate. I will underscore that, of course, what role the FBI will be able to play in Mexico depends a lot on the willingness of our Mexican partners to embrace and bring us in, and that's still something that's being worked out. It's a very fluid situation right now. So I don't, as we sit here right now, yet know exactly what our footprint, if you will look like, but we'd be happy to follow back up with you as things progress.
Thank you.
And the National Counterterrorism Center doesn't actually work that particular issue.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you a question, Mr. Glawy. I spoke a few times with Secretary McAleen about the need to improve information sharing between DHS and HHS regarding allegations of abuse that were reported by migrants who'd been held at the Yuma Border Patrol Station, I'm sure you recall. Can you share the status of DHS efforts to ensure these types of incidents are reported more quickly and that swift action is taken when there are reports that require more protection of migrants and children?
So, Senator, as my role as the head of intelligence, I don't have a status update on that, but I'll take that for the record and have an answer for you back. But I will say, as a career law enforcement official, as well as a federal law enforcement official, that the men and women of the Department of Homeland Security operate at the most highest standards. And when there is an incident that has to be reported to the Inspector General or to the FBI, that's handled quickly and mitigated as fast as possible within the department.
Thank you. Back in September, this committee held a hearing with outside experts on domestic terrorism. At that hearing, I spoke about the importance of information sharing and ensuring that our state and local law enforcement entities can access the information they need. Such information sharing is always easier for larger police departments, such as those in Phoenix or Tucson, but is more challenging for our rural sheriffs. With regard to information sharing between federal, state, and local law enforcement entities, what steps have your agencies taken in the past year to ensure that small or rural law enforcement entities are able to get better access to information about threats and trends? And what do these agencies still need to improve on?
So I'll start and then turn it over to Undersecretary Glaoui. On our end, our principal engagement from a day-to-day basis with our state and local partners, which includes some very small departments, is through our joint terrorism task forces, and we have 200 of them all over the country, and we have task force officers, which are essentially state and local officers from, in many cases, including some of those small departments, who work full or in some cases part-time on our task forces, which gives them access to all the same information that all the FBI folks and federal partners on the task forces have. That's probably the most significant means. In addition, we jointly with DHS on a number of instances will put out bulletins of different sorts. They're pretty frequent. That provide information in a fairly granular way about what we're seeing in terms of threats and so forth. And so those are some of the big ones that I'd highlight. And I'll maybe let David chime in.
Yes, just to follow on that. So a couple of the big infrastructure, and I'll talk about very specifics with Arizona and the southwest border. So my office hosts the Homeland Security Information Network, Intel. So we host the products for the FBI, for the Department of Homeland Security, and our state and local partners, and the private sector. There's currently 42,000 products on it. In fiscal year 2017, we had about 17 or so thousand views. I'm happy to report in 2019, after a very aggressive rollout with this, we had over 90,000 views on this. We hosted over 11,500 products. This is an unclassified network that's available in all fusion centers as well as satellite locations and a login capability. Regarding the southwest border, because you're right, we have a limited capacity and they need intelligence officers to give them tactical level information, unclassified information and classified. I did a pilot program starting in, I believe it was in June and May. I put 19 DHS intelligence officers on the southwest border to include Arizona. That resulted in 45 drug seizures, 45 drug-related arrests, 35 seizures of weapons and drugs, and 150 intelligence reports. I'm going to permanently deploy, I think, right around 10 intelligence officers permanently to the southwest border in the very small sheriffs and municipal law enforcement departments to enable them to do an enterprise approach and scale capabilities to share information.
Thank you. A follow-up question for both of you. Last year, Congress passed and the President signed into law the Preventing Emerging Threats Act, which grants authorities to DHS and the DOJ to counter threats from unmanned aircraft systems. During my visits to the border, I've seen evidence of the threats these drones can pose. I've actually watched drones come over the border in broad daylight. So could you tell us about what DHS and DOJ are doing to mitigate the dangers to our nation from these unaccompanied aircraft system threats?
So, Senator, thank you for the question. And I was I was Chairman Johnson's, one of his lead witnesses in the lead up to passing that legislation that he championed. So I can speak specifically, and I was also in the southwest border and did a report for that for one of the news networks. So this is a threat that continues to be a threat. We track that, the Department of Homeland Security, not just on the southwest border, but on drone incursions over critical infrastructure. And we're seeing a percentage increase that just keeps increasing. And in engagement with our state and local and private sector, I was just out with the Los Angeles Police Department Chief and the New York Police Department Commissioner on drones, where the drone legislation was an outstanding first step. They are saying now that they need more capabilities and more within their own authorities to mitigate these threats. But the southwest border is just one of many from the drone threats that threatens our critical infrastructure, our mass gatherings, and ways to move illicit goods over the border, as well as use it as a counter-surveillance platform to suck up information from our military or our law enforcement or our private institutions in the country.
I would just add that while we're extremely grateful to the chairman and others for that legislation, this is a threat that is overtaking us in many ways. We are currently investigating a number of incidents in the U.S. of attempts to weaponize drones in one way or another. Certainly, we've been seeing them, as you mentioned, down on the border. We've also seen drones used to deliver contraband, into prisons. And of course, as the rest of the committee knows as well, there have been efforts to use drones quite frequently on the battlefield against our forces and our allies overseas. Our focus from the FBI end has been principally on the mass gathering situation, so we're very focused on things like the Super Bowl, et cetera, not because the others aren't incredibly important, but just in the realm of being able to prioritize the use of these new authorities that's at the moment where we are. There's going to be a need for more technological solutions. Disrupting drones over large, crowded civilian areas is a different kind of exercise than doing it in the battlefield. And we're working very closely with our partners, DHS, Department of Transportation, DOD, and obviously DOJ on that.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I've exceeded my time. Thank you for your indulgence.
Yes, you have.
Sorry, I apologize.